I hope you're all going to hear now what I have to say about time. And basically, the interesting thing here this time, when this was being organised, this talk, was that I presumed it was the normal length of time for one of these talks. These talks tend to go for about an hour to an hour and a half. So, what we're actually going to do is we're going to do it in 45 minutes. Be patient with me, please. I'll chop my way through it. The danger is, of course, I do too much chopping and it comes down to 10 minutes. We won't do that, okay? But we're going to have to work a little bit just to get it down to that. So what I want you to do is, I'm going to do my best to be clear, but I'm going to have to move along fairly nifty to do the 45 minutes, okay? My report, I presume, I think it's with the committee, and it may be online at this stage, but I'm sure if it's not, it's going to be. So basically, what I want you to grasp is this: we've got the castle here, and a kilometre away, we've got the church ruin. Okay. In the middle of those is the Ringfort, about 450 metres one way, 550 metres the other. Okay. There's no direct evidence so far to help us with dating the Ringfort. We can look at the castle, and we can then look at everything comes behind the castle or from the castle, which is lordship, the local rulers, the local surnames, and so on and so forth. And then we can go to the church on the other side, and we can do the clerical history of the church. And we can, when doing both of these, we can extrapolate out information, hopefully, which is of use for the Ringfort. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do the history, and we're going to do the history of the lordship here. We're going to do the history of the church, and then we're going to work these into the Ringfort. Okay? So we'll go here, and now this is what I was going to discuss, so I'm going to kind of cut it. Basically, the earthwork, I'm going to talk about a little bit about it. The possible relationship of Baltimore Castle and Tullagh Parish Church, the possible relation of these to the earthwork. An overview of the history of the Corcu Loigde, who are the local tribe here, if you like the word tribe. The O'Driscolls were their chieftains. I'm going to look at it Tullagh, which is it's a parish-size unit. It's a local community unit. The country was divided into them. There were hundreds and hundreds of them, and the Normans did away with them mostly. And we know the Tullagh that Baltimore lay within. Okay, it was a Tullagh called Genealogy, and I'll be coming back to those. We're going to look at the Normans. We're going to look at the church and parish. From the point of view that the church may perhaps be a new discovery, a very powerful, important church. And we're going to look at St. Conall of Tullagh 10. Now, Tullagh 10 is probably the church of Tullagh, all right? So, as I pop along, you know the first paragraph there, you can be reading away for yourselves. The earthwork has been identified as a Ringfort by the archaeological inventory, but Professor Billy O'Brien of UCC holds a dissenting view, suggesting that the earthwork is Bronze Age provenance, possibly a burial cist or something like that. Further archaeological investigation is required to clarify these matters. As the majority archaeological opinion seems to support the view that the earthwork is a Ringfort, I will work on this basis. Again, I am a historian, not an archaeologist, just to clarify that. There are two elements of historical significance in the townland: the castle, located around 450 metres from the earthwork, and the original parish church, situated around 650 metres from the earthwork. Both castle and church are likely to have had some connection with the earthwork, or less, given the general and the bottom part of the text is cut for some reason. I wonder. No. So, who is doing the tech stuff? I wonder. It'd be possible to catch that last sentence.
It's proximity of both to the earthwork.
Is it? Okay, so that's grand. If you can do that for me, we're fine. Okay, so basically, the castle was built here, an original castle. I'll come to the castle in a minute. I'm just chopping this down in my head before I move on. Baltimore lies within the area of the ancient kingdom of Corcu, Loigde. Later, Corcu can be pronounced, and there are several other pronunciations depending on what type of, what period Irish you're using. And this means the people of Loigde or Loigde, a male forename, but the genealogies are unclear as to his origins, and in any case, these are probably fictional. So basically, you know, if you go back in medieval Ireland, before the Normans came, the country was divided into various, you could call them tribes. And the Corcu Loigde were the tribe, if you will, who occupied sort of coastal West Cork, right around up to Kenmare in Kerry. So basically from Kinsale to Kenmare. Okay, and basically the Corcu Loigde were originally known as the Darina, and they, from what we know, were a powerful family settled in mid-Munster, and they, in the 5th century, they were replaced by people called the Oganachta, a confederation of other tribes, and they were pushed south, and that's when we think the Corcu Loigde occupied coastal West Cork and into Kerry. Okay, I'm chopping nicely. That's a nice map there, isn't it? The O'Bahan, Rossellaher is Rosscarbery. These are the Anglo-Norman cantrids. A cantrid, again, much of this is complex. A cantrid, the Anglo-Norman cantrids replaced the Gaelic Triachicade. These were large-scale territorial units. Each of them would have had a petty king. There were probably about 180 of them. And what you're looking at here, the 4 of them that the Corcu Loigde kingdom was divided into, you see them there. O'Bahan, that's Iban. Rossellaher is Rosscarbery. Corcu, okay, and then up in Bear, which was the Bear Peninsula was a detached portion of Corcu Loigde. Okay, the name, if you look there at O'Bahan, Rossellaher, and Corcu, what happened was the kings of the territory were driven by the Normans into the western end of it, and these are the O'Driscolls, and the name Corcu actually came with them and came to from describing the entire kingdom. It is now describing just one segment out of 4. So, but that's where the name comes from, Corcu. Okay, so we're doing okay. Yeah, and originally the Corcu Loigde, as I said, ran from Kenmare right around. They lost the Fánaíochtaigh, the western land, probably in the 11th or 12th centuries. So they became divided. Bear was detached then at that stage. Corcu, as you see there, included Baltimore, if you can figure your way around that map, and you can see the islands coming south as well. That was the cantrid of Corcu, okay? So basically, yeah, that I've covered that. We are fortunate to possess extensive genealogies of the Corcu Loigde, as well as documentary evidence for the internal organisation of parts of the kingdom. These genealogies consist of over a dozen separate lines of descent, many of which ruled their own Tullagh. The Tullagh, as I mentioned already, was an important unit, and the country was divided into them. They tended to be sort of parish-sized units. They had a number of sort of features that were diagnostic of them. They were units of military levy, and they were also probably they probably had a church. Well, we know that they had a church, which was the Tullagh Church, which was the senior church essentially in the Tullagh. And again, the Church of Tullagh would seem to have fulfilled that function, because we actually have we have how would I say, yes, as part of the genealogies, as part of a set of genealogies, we have a description of the name and territorial extent of several tuatha in the centre to the west of Baltimore. Okay, this sort of these how will I say, parts of a genealogy that refer to how will I say, sorry, they're topographical gazetteers, I'm sorry. Basically, there are only 4 or 5 of them that have survived, and they tell us the structure of Ireland before the Normans. They tell us the important surnames and clans and territorial extents. And there were, as I said, there are just 4 or 5 of these, and there is one which covers the territory now from west, so from Kilcoe probably up to Clonakilty or thereabouts. It's that extensive. Again, these are very, very unusual. We don't have too many of them. I'm cutting now like mad here. There are various. I actually have a list of them here coming up shortly. The senior line of the Corcu Loigde, while we're on the subject of them and their kings, for most of its history was the line of Aengus Bolg, ancestor of the E. Bolg, about whom nothing else is known. But he is the ancestor of various people and various kings from the 600s and from the 900s. And these kings, when the period or fashion of surnames comes in, because before surnames there were tribal names, and the tribal name of the Ebolg, the tribal name was Ebolg, and this changes to O'Driscoll then, when the adoption of the habit of surnames comes in. Again, I'm just mentioning the Coffees or the Cowigs there in the earlier part, because they were the kings of the central part of Corcu Loigde, and the O'Driscolls were kings, at least originally, of the western part. Okay, the Normans come in. The eastern parts of Corcu Loigde fell to the Anglo-Norman, the Barry family, while the Carbery McCarthys and the O'Donovans obtained the central parts from Clonakilty to Glandore. Again, now we have tuatha for all of these, okay? The O'Driscolls only managed to retain the western portions. The O'Driscoll Moor territory stretched from Castlehaven to Baltimore, including the parishes of Crea and Achadown, while that of O'Driscoll Og occupied mostly Achadown parish, while the O'Driscoll of Beara were lords of that territory until dispossessed by a branch of the O'Sullivans. Again, we're talking about lordship. There's what basically is Baltimore Castle. The archaeologists will tell us that it was built in the early 17th century. I'm talking here now about Eamon Cotter's archaeological excavations made about 10 or 12 years ago. In any case, the history of the castle. It may or may not have a castle. There may or may not have had a castle on the site. But if it's not there on the site, there was certainly a castle from at least 1215, somewhere nearby. Okay. Yeah, so that's that. Now, the genealogies contain interesting information, and the question I asked there at the top of that, of course, is what of Baltimore and its probable Ringfort in all of this? The genealogies contain interesting information on the settlement structure of the central part of the kingdom, from west of Baltimore east to Clonakilty. This manuscript, and this is what I was talking about a little while ago, about these naming these various tuatha. This manuscript is a pre-Norman date, if not indeed older than around 1100. This describes the central part, and I've mentioned that it's 7 subdivisions or tuatha and its leading families and landholding gentry in the central part. In the central part of Corcu or Corcu Loigde, the Triche Manig, the middle Triche, or the middle Cantred, was comprised of 7 tuatha, each with its ruling Taoiseach family. There was the Fuala, the tuatha were ruled by an aristocratic family, all of them, or almost all of them, sometimes by a steward, but mostly by an aristocratic family with some connection to the ruling overlords of the territory. Okay? The tuatha were not themselves territorial units they weren't independent, they were part of. They were a subdivision of the kingdoms, the petty kingdoms. Okay? This document I'm talking about, basically, unfortunately, place names are not given, so that what we have is a list of gentry families whose location within the kingdom is unknown. So we know the shape of the tuatha because there are enough place names mentioned to delineate them, but we don't know, and we know the families who live in the tuatha, but we don't know exactly within the tuatha those families lived. Okay? Okay. So we know the tuatha that Baltimore was part of. It is the westernmost tuatha. This is named in the sources as Tuatha I Gillavihil, the tuatha of the devotee of Michael the Archangel, as in Skellig, Michael, or St. Michael's Rock in Cornwall, and Mont Saint Michel in Normandy. Okay, so we know that this is the name of the tuatha that we have here in Baltimore. It's named in the sources Tuatha I Gillavihil and is comprised of 18 families. Some boundary locations are given. Tragumna is one. Ben Shidan is Bean Tion in Farran Connor Townland, again some miles to the east of here, and Bela Semand was probably a lost ford on the Savnos or Savnos, a tributary of the Illan. So this is the overall shape of this tuatha that Baltimore lies within. Based on a study of the area, O'Caron, late professor of history, suggested that Tuatha I Gillavihil contained the civil parishes of Abbeystrowry, Cray, Tullagh, Clare, and probably Ahadown and Kilcoe as well. I was able to confirm these conclusions by my own study into the Anglo-Norman half-cantred of Corcu, as described in 1207, where there is a reference to half-cantred called Corcu and the 2 tuatha that comprised it, and these are named. The small one was Tuatha I Conaid, alias Ongari, and a much larger one was Tuatha I Gillavihil, which we're talking about. This also had an alias. This is the first one I'm talking now. It was Tuatha Muinter Doric. We note that the E. Doric were one of the families listed in this tuatha in the proprietor's manuscript, in the manuscript that I'm talking about from the genealogies. Ongari seems to have included the parishes of Myros and Castlehaven, while Tuatha Muinter Doric, which survived as a super denomination or a place name for a large area, survived into the 17th century. You'll see it there, Tuatha Muinter Doric. So this dates back to pre-Norman times, and it's right down to the 17th century. Part of whose name is preserved in that of Towhead. Tuatha, that's where Towhead comes from. Okay. It is likely that the Baltimore area, and perhaps the probable Ringfort, which is the study of this paper, was occupied by one of the 18 families listed in the manuscript. Unfortunately, we cannot tell which one it might be. And there, I don't really That's basically the parishes I talk about there. Okay, I had down Cray, Tullagh, and here we are here, okay, I think. So that's the Tullagh the two is quite large. It's one of the largest of them. Now, yeah, there's the surnames then that we find in them. So I asked the question there, what are the proprietors of the Tullagh? And basically they're there, o Davarda, o Dooling, o Hokan, o Davakan, o Mekidich, I Kievan, I Kertig, I Buig, I Mangan, I Darik, I Mekan, I Hangle, I Mohla, I Mail Edar, I Adam, I Bar, agus I Rosna. While many of these surnames are now obsolete, indicating their antiquity, some do survive today. O'Dooling seems to survive as the rare surname Doolin around Rosscarbery in the 19th century. O'Dubbacan is probably the later Duggan, although there is a similar name known from North Cork. E. Kertig may be the surname Carty. No, that's not McCarthy. There is a Carty surname in Longford. Possibly another one here in West Cork, unless, of course, this is McCarthy minus the Mac. I Mangan is the modern Mangan and Mungan. I Angle is the modern Hanley, a surname recorded in the Knocka Hanley place name of 1305, whose precise location again is uncertain beyond being in Tullagh I Gillivichil, when belonging to a branch of the Norman. And that's De Courcy, the Norman De Courcy family. No, sorry, Carew. The Norman Carew family. No, basically I don't need to go into that. That's where I talk about ringforts, but you've had all that before and you know what a ringfort is. So I needn't spend any time on that, except to make the point that some ringforts could, there's one in Clare that was still in use in the 18th century. The O'Daly's of Wintervara of Sheep's Head, they had a bardic school in the Ringfort there in the early 1600s, and there are several other examples that you could give, but we don't have the time. The presence of the Anglo-Normans in the Baltimore area is suggested by an entry in the Annals crediting one Mac Schlevne with the construction of a castle in Cork, Loigde, but his identification is unknown. The half-cantred of Corcu was in Anglo-Norman hands in 1207, also in 1250, and in 1282 this half-cantred was valued at 40 marks. Marks is 13 shillings and 4pence, and now but 10 because wholly destroyed by the War of the Irish. So this is what's happening local here, locabouts in 1282, okay? The O'Driscolls have thrown off the yoke of the Normans in all probability. That's what that means. And the O'Donovans and the others, you don't need much explanation. There's an ecclesiastical complex on the left because we'll be looking at churches shortly, and there's your typical ringfort on the left there, or on the right, sorry. And we don't need to spend much time with that either. No. While Doonashade is the correct name for the chief castle of the O'Driscoll Moor and its surrounding townlands, the popular name is Baile Antivor, in English Baltimore, which first appears in 1413. The style Doonashade continues in use with the genealogies. Basically, we come down to the last chieftain, Sir Fineen O'Driscoll, the last chieftain, who dies around 1629. He's lost his estates to English and Irish speculators. The present castle of Baltimore was probably built around 630 by Walter Coppinger. Dominic Coppinger, he's down there in the next paragraph. And he acquired Baltimore Castle during the 1630s and it is found in his son James's possession after the restoration in 1670. It was sold in 1703, having been confiscated by the trustees, and later came into the possession of the Carberry or Freak family. That's the lordship done. make what you will of it. It's an interesting one, I think, especially with all the names, the surnames in the Tullagh. What happens next was quite surprising. I actually ended up discovering a monastery that had hitherto not been there, 10. We had hitherto not been there. And the dating of the spread of Christianity, I am not going to talk about. Take a quick look at that before we move on. That's the Down survey of 1656. And there's Baltimore, there's the harbour. Okay?
Paul, no, 20 minutes.
Okay, that's better. Okay, bang, bang, bang. No. Lads, you're putting me under first pressure. No. So, and this is Baltimore in the 1780s. That's the Carberry estate map, okay? Castle Freak, the Castle Freak people.